Good morning. I'm just going to introduce myself and let Colin come up. Joe Pindell from Pitney, as you just heard. I'm a managing director for our global solution management team, responsible for our go-to-market software solutions. And then I'm going to bring up Colin here to talk more about how that's applied in a business capacity. Colin.
Okay. Hello. So I'm from Accenture Labs. I'm sure some of you know who Accenture is. It's a consulting company, but quickly we have Accenture Labs, which is the R&D branch of Accenture, and we do a lot of things with prototyping and realizing POCs for the kind of realizing the art of the possible. So, so that's who I am. That's who we are. And so what I want to do is kind of explain to you some of the work we're doing. And one of the use cases we have is the intelligent complaint handling. And so I want to walk you through this use case. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how we're doing it and the kind of tooling that we need to make it possible, right? So adjust this a little bit. All right, so our intelligent complaint handling is something we're doing with handling a lot of user complaints with, for example, credit cards and how that can be made a little better, right? And so the state space for a lot of complaint handling is based off of static-based decision trees, and when you're on that call, you're waiting for someone to answer, your complaint or your text messages, as it may be, through those chat windows. A lot of the availability is based off of first available customer service representative, and on top of that, when they actually do resolve your problems, there's no feedback mechanisms, right? So the next guy that comes in with a complaint, no idea that there was somebody prior to him, like say 10 calls ago, that had the same complaint, same resolution, and things like that. And so there's actually a lot of frustration. What I'm calling the frustration space, along with the state space, is you have a lot of long wait calls. So for example, if you ever call the USPS, Postal Service, sometimes you're on the, for 4 hours, right? So you want to be able to handle that, okay? And I know that because I called them just recently. It's very, very frustrating. And I never got my problem solved. So the package never did arrive. But on top of that, as you're talking to the CSR, the customer service representative, sometimes you get transferred between representatives, right? Like, I can't handle this, let me escalate it up, or what have you. And ultimately, as in my case with the USPS, it was an incomplete resolution, okay? So we want to be able to address that problem, make it easier for the customers, and so on. So what the solution space is essentially we want to analyze those call transcripts. We want to semantically understand what people are talking about and what they're complaining about, recommend solutions, and continuously capture those learnings. And we want to do that through a knowledge graph, right? So, and the reason being is that, once we have it in a knowledge graph, we can do lots of things. We can find related issues, we can find related resolutions, we can understand those CSRs and their expertise, and we can match people up to those CSRs that best know how to handle a particular problem, all right? So, our goal really is to connect you, like I was saying, to that right CSR quickly, so that you don't have to constantly get escalated up. So, like for example, if you're going to the IT support, I'm sure some of you have even called IT support call line for something at some point in your lives, and they end up saying, I can't handle this, let me take you to the next tier or whatever. So we want to be able to alleviate that quickly, right? So we can get that turnover and get them resolved quickly so that we can handle the next guy even faster. We want to understand the network of customers as well. So when someone calls in for a complaint, we need to understand if they're related to someone else so that we can very quickly identify that they're maybe not the actual VIP customer, but they're maybe related to the VIP customer so that we don't necessarily tick off the wrong person, okay? We want to avoid customer churn. And so that being said, we want to continuously learn from everything we're doing with those customers as well. And that basically means we're merging lots of views. We're merging a customer 360 view, we're merging a accounts view, a complaints view, etc. Okay? So that's what we want to do, right? So what I'm going to do is walk you through the use case that we have and show you one of the screenshots actually right here, where we're enabling this customer 360. So we want to talk about what the state is now, where we're going to go, and how it works, right? So, like I was saying earlier, the current state is static decision trees, right? But we want to move beyond that. We want to make it much more dynamic. We want to resolve things quickly and provide that guidance to that customer service representative, right? In line while they're talking to somebody, okay? We want to be able to move beyond that classification that's just static, like someone says, you push the button through the menu, I want to talk to billing, I want to talk to, account information or whatever it is, right? We want to understand a little bit more about their complaints, right? So if we can quickly analyze what they're talking about or what they've written about, that it's really about a points and rewards system, or it's about a promotion, in particular, say a summer promotion, we want to know about that really, really quickly, because that'll help us dive down much, much quicker. And then so the other thing is, I mentioned it earlier, that you don't want to just be randomly assigned to somebody based off of call volume. If someone actually does know how to handle the problem, let's get them to that person. Let's get them quicker, right? And that'll prevent, well, first of all, customer churn as they get ticked off and decide, I've had it with this company, I'm leaving. But if we can address them sooner based off of what they're actually complaining about, what they're actually talking about, to some CSRs expertise where he knows all about IT problems or something like that, if that's what it's related to, then we can get them there much, much quicker. And so what we want to do is model those customer interactions contextually, right? We want to understand better what they're talking about, and we want to actually merge all the information I was talking about earlier so we can get a much more holistic view of what is going on. Okay. All right. So what I have on the screen here is how an example interaction might work. So like I said, it's all about context and guidance. So imagine you're actually Melanie on the screen here. And you're calling in about something. I guess you can't, well, I guess the text is okay, you can read it. She recently, called, or recently got a card, didn't see the rewards that she expected based off the promotion, so she's calling to ask about it. And if you're that CSR, what are you going to do, right? So your first task really is to understand what's going on, right? And this is where we're starting to use relationships as first-class citizens in our knowledge graph to provide data context. And so we want to, figure out what she wants to do. But if I don't have any context, I'm going to, quickly realize I can't help her because I don't know anything, and then they're going to get irritated, and then we have to escalate them up, right? And so without a knowledge graph, we might actually miss the mark and not get the context of the problem. And so we want to show you that there's a better way, right? And so we want to analyze, like I said, their complaint, and just that complaint, and shove the information into that knowledge graph and break out the key features of what she's talking about. So for example, she's talking about a visa. Her 10,000 points weren't awarded based off of a current spend. So we can actually extract that out immediately and say, because she's talking about visa, she's talking about 10,000 points. Is there anything in the graph that relates to that, right? So let's go find that. And so we can then map also the rest of her information out according to what she's talking about in there. Besides that visa, we basically create an entire feature map around her complaint, okay? And so the goal is to resolve that quickly. So like I said, Melanie is essentially complaining about that signature card, and that's what to get as the input. And we want to get the output, essentially a much more guided interface, right? So if you look at the lower part where it's green, you can imagine this is how it might go if the CSR actually had a little better knowledge. And what you're seeing on the right side here is, although it's not very clear, unfortunately, is a cropped view of what the front end actually looks like. So I'll just walk you through that a little bit since you can't see it. But essentially at the top here, you actually have her complaint. And although it's not shown here very well, there's actually portions of her text which are highlighted, which are the key features that we've extracted. And from that, we immediately can categorize what they're talking about, right? And so she just happens to be talking about her points of reward, a Visa card, and so on, right? And so we can, from that, very quickly deduce that she's talking about a Visa card. So the interaction from that with the customer is much, much different, right? It's not just, I can't help you, let me just escalate you, right? There's a lot less transitioning, or hopefully a lot less waiting on the phone. And so you can see that she would very quickly get a resolution with Matt at CSR saying, yes, is this about a certain account? She'll say yes or no, hopefully yes it is in this case. And then from there, we can walk her through the problem and understand a little more context, right? And so, like I was saying on the graph, from that text, we're looking at the graph and see she's talking about the summer 2018 promotion, points and rewards, and we're talking about the account ending in 2532, okay? So, what does that mean, right? So that actually does help with providing the first level triage, if you will, of a customer complaint. We're actually adding that context to that CSR, so he's not going in cold. But that's not the whole piece, right? The second piece is we need to be able to understand their complaint so that we can, or infer, other complaints, so that related complaints, so we can see if there's other resolutions that were used, and we can rank them and reuse that information for future learnings, right? So, and this is what knowledge graphs are obviously built for, right? For semantic understanding of your data, inferencing, and so forth. And so what you're seeing on the screen here is, again, it's not very easy, but basically they have a complaint, and from that, since we categorized it using NLP, we were able to figure out that there's a category it belongs to. And that category is actually chosen from a couple things. We actually had that feature map that lists all the important things about a complaint, and we automatically map it to a category through a topic modeling process. The category itself is semantically labeled by a human, so we know that it's actually points and rewards actually means something. And then from there, we can backtrack and find other complaints that are attached to that category. And we can see if that category also has a resolution. And the more popular resolution, the more likely we're to recommend it. So this is how we go about querying for complaints, looking for similar ones, and displaying the results based off of those similarities. And like I said, that CSR will go and say, yeah, that was a good resolution. I'm going to upvote that. And that's what happens with the next guy coming along. Hopefully they'll get that same resolution if it's a related complaint, right? So, okay. So then the third thing that we are doing in our use case is modeling and merging the data views, right? And this is where tooling comes in of key importance. We're actually, like I said, merging 3 views. We're merging an accounts view, where you're talking about or displaying information about an account, purchases, the type of account it is, whether it's a Citibank, a Visa, or whatever, I'm sorry, MasterCard. Because as you know, some companies offer more than one card type. And that gets merged onto a customer, right? In the green part here. And that's where we have our customer 360 view, which also has account views, but has the person information, their work address, their home address, potentially who they're related to, other family members right here. And then we also have that customer relationship management system that's merged in as well. And this is where the complaints view comes in, where we're actually storing information about the customer interactions, what the features are that are important in those interactions, what their interactions are talking about, the topics, the semantic labeling of those categories. But it could be also information about promotions that were offered, whether promotions were taken, whether certain promotions get linked to other accounts as well. So that gets all addressed to this thing, and we actually can see this displayed. Unfortunately, it's not very obvious here, but it's displayed in that front end where we can very quickly determine, because we have the information on the knowledge graph, that she's a VIP customer, or that she's related to a VIP customer, or that we can find some of the accounts and transaction information down here in our view. So putting it all together, right? the next step is I want to just talk quickly about the architecture and the flow. It's not the greatest still. I'll just walk you through this. Basically, the way this works is we're taking in all the data from multiple data sets for the complaints data, the customer data, CSR data, and so on. And that goes through a whole process where we're doing ETL on it, cleaning it up, removing bad data, and so on. But the basis for this actually is one of the tools that we're using is Pitney which sits on top of Neo4j. And Joe will talk a little more about that. But from there, that then produces an API that the rest of the system can use, and that front-end view that you saw can actually hit it. And actually does all these things automatically for us with the publishing of the APIs and stuff like that. It makes things a lot easier and allows us to scale things out on the back end so that I don't have to worry about making that front end and so on. So, or at least the APIs at the front end, and I don't have to worry about scaling out horizontally. So tooling is actually really important. But what the tooling did allow us to do is not only that for the ETL and scaling, but also to do the modeling and modifying and making the views accessible not only to the CSR on the front-end application that you saw, but also accessible to the technical business user on the back end for them to modify everything. So what you're seeing basically in the lower right here corner here is our schema view, which shows all the linkages and things like that. I do apologize for the low quality. So that being said, I'm going to throw it back over to Joe, who'll talk about why we chose the tooling that we did and all about Pitney Bowes.
Thanks, and I'll go real quick. So basically, we're thrilled to be the technology provider for an outfit like Accenture, especially in the labs. Up on the screen, you can just see a couple of screenshots from that tooling that Colin talked about. Just a quick question. So how many of you have heard of Pitney Bowes? Okay, how many of you knew that Pitney Bowes was a technology provider in software? Okay, significantly less hands. So that's one of the reasons why we're thrilled to be here, because we have over 30 years of experience in the software field providing these types of solutions. We specifically chose graph technology back in 2012 as part of our Spectrum technology platform to do a lot of what Colin just described in a business capacity and then some. And you can see just some of the bullet points up on the screen. And again, we're always excited to work with our colleagues at Accenture and others to then take our technology and apply it towards a business capacity. And then I'll have Colin come back up and kind of go through the last couple of steps for that project.
Forgot about these. All right, so so basically, what this use case demonstrates is that we're using semantic understanding of the data to add that context for inferencing. We're trying to use that knowledge graph as much as possible, treat it as first-class citizens. And we're trying to discover and learn new topics, new information about complaints, and hopefully help that customer stay off that phone and actually do other things in their life, right? And through this project, we try to show scalability, not just from a tooling aspect or engineering aspect, of creating the knowledge graph, whatever, but also to the human accessibility aspect. And that comes down to the tooling, how you design it and everything, and how easy is it for me to get in and out, how easy is it for me to scale it out horizontally, right? And how easy is it for someone to actually maintain it. So what's next for us, right? So one of the next things we're going to be doing is graph versioning, where we're looking at ways we can track changes over time, but not only that, not just say, this is one slice of the graph, here's the next slice of the graph, and so on, but it's more of if, we have certain search queries, how do we know which version the query belongs to, right? Because as you have more and more applications using it, you can change your graph and it can evolve, but the applications need to at least sometimes have access to the previous versions because they're older and haven't been updated, for example. And then are there other ways to do merging? Can we use like inheritance and things like that to make our life a lot easier? So that's it. Thank you very much.